So following on from Anthony's talk, I'm going to talk about a specific set of standards that are related to medical devices. Before I get started, actually, I'm going to do slightly reverse. So Anthony's bio is at the end, mine's going to start. So yeah, let's go off. So a little bit of background as to who I am and what I do. So I'm technical director for Havas, Lynx. What I do, what my team do, is build healthcare systems, so software systems. I'm an ISO 13485 auditor, so I have a bit of experience in doing all this. Some of the folks that we actually work with, as well as a company, so we work with a lot of these guys, and we also have some ocean company that we keep as well. So quick. So onto the standard itself. Before I start, who here is actually in a software engineering background or has done software engineering? Okay, that's good. So I'm glad. Who here has done Agile or knows Agile or has done Agile? Great, good, brilliant. Okay, that's good. So I'm going to make a few assumptions before I dig in really. The assumptions that I'm going to make is that in the context of what I'm going to talk about is that it's already a medical device. So if you're applying your particular scenario to what I'm going to talk about, it is already a medical device. If it's not a medical device, based on the classifications that Anthony has mentioned, then none applies. But if it does, then it all applies. What I'm also going to make an assumption about as well is that you actually have a risk process and quality management process as well. They're kind of important. I'm not going to talk around 13485, but it's a quality management process around the business, around your business, and how you as a business, how you're going around creating these things. 14971 is a risk management process as well, and risk and quality management are very important processes in developing medical devices. The context of what we're going to talk around does apply to these things. I'm also going to assume as well that you've classified it as per mostly what Anthony actually already talks around, so I won't go that point. So in terms of where 62384 actually sits, in a lot of these standards, if you're building a piece of hardware, for example, then you have these things up here. And if you're building a piece of software which goes on this hardware, then this applies. These things, what I've just mentioned, are in terms of more around your environment, your business, and those processes there within. The reason why I'm saying that it's also a piece of hardware and software is that 6234 as a software process also applies to something that you would, as a software you would actually apply a piece of hardware, or it can be something that will run a phone. It can also be a website, it can also be an executable application as well. I know we've talked around a lot of these things in the context of mobile and things, but 6234 does not make that distinction. It's for a piece of software. Okay, so what is 6234? It's a software development lifecycle standard, but it has no bearing on what that actual standard actually is. So if you're using waterfall, if you're going to use Agile, you're going to use iterative, you're going to use evolutionary, whatever you're going to use, and the millions of SDLCs that exist out there, it's not descriptive, it doesn't care. What it does say is there's certain things that need to happen and that are present, and the reason why these things have to be present is because what this will generate as a process is going to give you a lot of documentation, a lot of things that if you're audited or if someone's going to come and see you to see how your piece of software has been built, depending upon its classification, then all of these things will spit that documentation out so the auditors can see these things. If you're also going to deal with the FDA as well, then the FDA will expect to see quite a lot of these things as well, but they have their own bearing. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit around terms as well. These things all very relevant, so what I'm going to talk around. So 6234 has its own definitions around some of these terms. So in terms of harm, there's physical injury or damage. That's kind of what it means by harm. By risk, it means probability, so it's looking around if there's harm and what the severity of that harm will be and what the probability is. Traceability is to the degree of a relationship, so how can I trace this point to this point, and what those points are. And verification is how I can confirm those things as well. So these points are really, really important. Last thing is SOOP as well. So I mentioned SOOP throughout this. What it stands for is software unknown provenance or process, depends on which one you look up. What it basically is something that's beyond your control. So it can be someone else's piece of software, it can be a open source library, it can be a DLL, it can be commercial piece of software. It doesn't really matter. It can be anything. But it's something that you don't control. You have no idea how to control it. So you have to control this if you bring it into your sphere of software. Okay. So software classification as well, and I'll talk a bit around this. 6234 has its own kind of classification around what it deems to be certain things. So you can kind of retrofit class 1s and 2s and 3s into this, but you may not. And because there's class 1s, A's and B's, class 2s, A's and B's, and there's all different kinds of things. 6234 makes its own distinction. So a class A is there's no injury or damage. Class B is there's a non-serious injury is possible. And class C is that you're going to kill someone or someone's arm going to fall off. The thing about what an injury actually is as well is that it's really based on the severity. What the probability of severity as well? If there's any chance of these things happening, then these are the classifications you follow. The reason why I'm talking around classes in terms of A, B and C as well is because the different parts of the standard apply. So if you class A on some things, class B some things, class C some things. So the other thing to bear in mind as well is that in software sense, software classification, it can change. So if you change a component part of software, that then in turn changes the classification. It will change the classification of the whole thing. There is no distinction. So if one part changes, it triggers the whole. And the classes can go up as well. So bear those things. The other thing to mention as well is that unless you classify it, then it's class C unless you say otherwise. Okay. So that's the point about documenting why the rationale has changed. If it does change, then there's lots of reasons as to why it can do it. So it may be that you've asked for change, you've got different requirements, even hardware can do it. So in terms of the actual standard itself and what it actually means, what really the standard is that these are the component parts to the standard. So you've got these different processes that we follow, and then you'll have a release. You've got risk management, which is all part of this, and risk is really, really important. Configuration management is a big part of it, problem resolution is also a big part of it as well. So I'm going to dig into some of these things. The other thing to bear in mind is that the standard has its own language. Because it has its own language, it has slight different meanings. So we talked before around design files. Because 6234 is a software standard, it doesn't actually call them design files. It's a slightly different name for them. But the meaning is the same. What it means is that I need to show what was developed and how it was developed, and what the outcomes of those things are. Okay. So in terms of the actual things, I'm just going to explain some of these things just so you have an idea of what they all mean. What I've done as I run through these slides is I've mentioned which classes they apply to. So this applies to all three in a sense, but if it's actually A, it's the green bits, and if it's the B's and C's, it's the yellow bits. But there are variances. So here's some of the things that you'll be required to do. So you'll have a software development plan. This unlikely is going to change in the sense that the green bits, process methods and tools, and risk process, verification process, they probably won't change that much. The yellow bits will change, so you'll have deliverables, requirements, extra requirements, direct requirements, and even acceptance requirements as well. So these are bits and pieces that will change in this particular plan, but at the end of your software product, you'll have this great document to show for everything you can service things. The other point to remember is that you also really need to show an alarm or a warning or a message to a user, because that could influence them and how they use your particular piece of software. The next thing is in terms of the architecture and design as well. So again, this kind of process will generate certain documentation. What it's really around is the higher level, kind of how does this thing work? What are the major component parts, and what hardware will it say, how will that hardware interact? What parts of the software, what parts of your system will integrate with these things? So for example, if it was a mobile application, if it was sat if it's running on a phone, which phone, what version of that phone, what happens if that version changes, how is it interacting with the operating system, we treat the operating system as a soup thing, what are the software is it going to interact with, are you controlling those things, so that's where soup all fits in. You do need to have quite detailed designs as well, so because there's quite a lot of kind of big design up front, it feels like that, but it's not quite the same. The other thing to bear in mind as well is that you need a risk process, you need a verification process and there's documentation. But for a Class C, so this is for Bs and Cs, but if yours is a Class C, very high risk, you need to describe what the segmentation is between all the software items, so what's the individual risks, and when you separate those things, what are the risks. So software testing, as you can imagine, is very, very, very important with a lot of these things. So again, it's really kind of B's and C's. If you have a Class C, you need additional things for your acceptance plan and your processing results. So this is, you're defining how you're going to accept this piece of software, how does it work. If it's an A class, you still need a regression plan as well. So in other words, if you release your piece of software to market, how have you proven that it's not, that the classification A hasn't changed and you're also not introducing more risk as well. The actual risk process as well, also one of the things that you will keep throughout your process is a risk management file. There is no definition in the standard in terms of what a risk management file actually is. You really expect it to follow the risk management process, the SDLC risk management process, and how particular that one's going to work. The one that I favour is fairly low effect, but you can use whatever one you want. In terms of the actual risk analysis as well, you're looking for the risk analysis in the software, but also in changes to the software as well. So if you take a change, you need a change management process, because what's the risk? What's this doing? What's this causing? Is it changing my classification? Is it increasing my risks? Or what are my measures to control those risks? The other thing you need as well is configuration management. The reason why you need configuration management is it's really important. So again, in the mobile application sense, deploying it to a phone, what operating system of that phone, how are you deploying it. If you're deploying it to Android, for example, how are you controlling the multitude of Android versions that you will potentially target. And in doing so, are you deploying it in exactly the same way in every instance, or if that's changing, how is that changing? Again, in terms of configuration, you really need to document how it's configured. That's really important as well. How am I configuring this? You need to show that the orders so you can prove those things. Change management, I've just mentioned, but you need to keep records of change requests. It's really important, it's critical, absolutely critical. You need to show that if someone's asked for a change, then what's happened with that change? Has it been implemented? What are the risks of that change? How was it then implemented? How was it then rolled out? How was it deployed? You need traceability between all these things. So if someone asks you for that given change, what was the outcome of that change? And even in the software, can you see this change? And that was rolled out and applied. The other thing really important as well is problem resolution as well. And problem resolution can be something that you yourselves can raise. So you might find defects, that can be a problem. Your customers may find a problem. Your users may find a problem. So if you find if problems are there, what you need to do, document them, investigate them, and also potentially advise on these problems as well, depending upon the scale and complexity and depth of the problem. If it's so bad, you may need to advise. For example, you may need to advise a regulatory body, be it the FDA, MHRA, or whatever. The FDA are very keen on this sort of thing, if it poses a huge risk. The other thing as well is that you need to keep a record of what the resolution to that particular problem was as well, so you've got a verification of how you fix it and what you're doing with it. So that was 6034 in a nutshell. So what we're going to talk around now actually is TAR 45. Has anyone ever heard of this before? Okay, thank you. So TAR 45 it's an interesting one. If I was to go back 12 months, if you were using Agile as a software development lifecycle, then you would probably you'd be a bit of a challenge to see how it can apply something like 60.3.4, which sounds very big from design, very waterfallish almost. In terms of its requirements to build documentation, to keep a lot of documentation, how you apply it to something that's a very organic system such as Agile. And 12 months ago, it was very difficult to find how you would apply it and how it would fit in. And what happened was some guidance was issued in terms of how Agile can be applied. It was applied actually. It was created by this particular body, and what they came up with was this technical report, CR 45. And what's happened is the FDA recognised this report, so the FDA recognised it as how you can apply Agile to the requirements of the FDA and the requirements of 60.3.4. So really what this particular document looks at is how I can apply to 21 CFR 20, which is the actual FDA process, and 60.3.4 as well. It isn't prescriptive of any particular Agile process. It just talks about Agile, and talks about Scrum or XP or any of those things. It really looks at how you can adapt a incremental and evolutionary kind of way of doing things. That's how it retrofits a lot of these standards to Agile. The other things I mentioned as well really is that there's lots of, although this kind of document exists, there are lots of other ways that Agile can be applied. Lots of videos and blogs if you have a look. But I do find that the TR 45 is probably the best. It costs money, as does all the ISO standards. It's kind of quite expensive, £300 I think, but it's well worth the money. So in TR, what does it do? How does it apply it? So this document, this diagram is very similar to the one I showed you before. But what TAR does is it takes the requirements of a lot of these things, what we've just seen in 60.3.4, and then says, okay, how do I, in an Agile sense, then apply these things? So what it does is it says, for stories, so requirements in an Agile sense, and then for every increment, and then for every release, and then for every project. So what it does is it takes each one of these. Let's say I take software release, for example, 5.8, or 5.8 is. It then says I will apply those things to each one of these kind of periods of how Agile creates it. So it wants to kind of say these requirements, how does that fit in this process? So really, what the TAR 45 attempts to do is to align the requirements for an Agile of a document such as 60.3.4, so a requirement of building software in that sense, to the Agile Manifesto. So who knows? Anyone know what the Agile Manifesto is? Yeah. So the Agile Manifesto is kind of the, I don't know, I suppose it's ground zero of Agile, I suppose. In that it's a set of principles. A lot of guys came together 20 years ago to define a set of principles on which Agile is actually based. So XP, Scrum, all of those things are all base their values on the same manifesto. So a lot of these things that are involved, obviously these things involved, they're some of the values, and then some of the bits underneath are some of the requirements in the sense of what's required of you. So in Agile Manifesto, it states things like individual interactions over process and tools. What's kind of important, what TR 45 talks around is the tools really are supporting act, and the discipline is very important. It's more the discipline and all of these things. It also says about that Agile Manifesto statement is that working software with documentation. So Scrum and XP don't really generate documentation. And what TR 45 says is that it's really the documentation should be a part of your process, and you've got to find what adds value, not what doesn't add value, and make it work to your process. Let your process carry forward, and then generate documentation at the end. It also talks around customer collaboration as well, contract negotiation, and really what's really important around a lot of this is the customer roles in an Agile process. makes a lot of sense. But the customer role is an important one because it's who your customer actually is. In an Agile sense, most of the time you're working directly with your customer. Whereas from a medical device perspective, you need to identify who that person actually is, or who the set of people will be, so that you're making sure that you're targeting your device at that particular audience and how you're doing those things. So there's a bit of crossover there. But really, if you're going to make your product owner, actually that's a really important part of Agile, you make those people, that person, they're a representative of the customer, and you can show that they're representing your customers, then you've got a happy medium. The other thing as well is that Agile talks around responding to a change and following the plan. It's a myth that planning isn't part of Agile. It is, if it's done well, but you really have to show how it occurred and how. Okay, so in an agile process, the definition is something called definition of done. So I've tried to summarise this as best I can, and this is different for everybody, each and every other person that does it. But if in Agile sense, I apologise to those of you that are not familiar with Agile, but if we start from this end and then work that way, so we take that in an Agile sense you have stories and acceptance criteria. Then it's going to go through its development process, so your unit test pass, your integration test pass. You may have a code review, you may have done some pair programming possibly, then you have an acceptance test, and then you have your documentation. Yeah. So that's kind of, that should sort of say that's kind of how your process may work. But what your definition of done is each one of these states, if they use as gates, but the definition of done is that before this can go to this, what's my definition of done? How am I defining that it can move from one place to the next? So how can I define that? Some software engineers have finished coding these things, and then potentially if they go through an acceptance test, how that's going to work, how they define that they deliver the same product. So what's really, really important, and the standard talks about a lot, TR45 talks a lot about inputs and outputs as well. So how can you prove that your design inputs, so this could be your requirements, your acceptance tests, how is that equating to what the end product is, what this final piece of software will be, and how can you prove that? It's no good saying, well, here's my product, you've got to prove it. And you'll prove it by saying, well, here's the code, I can align my code to my requirements, I can show that I've done a code review on that code, and I can show who did that code, and when they did that code, and what the outcome of that code was. So configuration management pops up again, so that's really important. TR45 talks around some of these things. I've added some bits and pieces just to show some of these things. So one of the things that you can do here is that it talks around document configuration. So creating the baseline of configuration. So if I'm going to release to multiple platforms, I'm going to say, then how am I going to do that before I actually come to do it? So document those things. If I'm building a website, so taking this away from mobile for a second. If I'm going to build a website, then how am I going to deploy to my servers? What servers am I going to deploy to? How is it going to get delivered? What are the browsers that it's going to get delivered to? How are all those things going to work? So if you use the principle called DevOps here, there are these things called from the server perspective, I'm using these for the mobile sense, but there's these sorts of tools. Up at Jeff, if you've not got DevOps in your team and you're going to do a lot of this, then get that kind of knowledge in your team. Very, very worth it. The other thing about baselines as well is that the other thing you can do is that you can do it at the start, in terms of creating a baseline. You can do it at the end possibly as well. If you're going to do it at the start, then great, but do it in iteration 0. You can do it at the end and do it in a hardening iteration. The TR45 doesn't talk about those things. I've added those things. That's my bit of advice. The other thing as well is about controlling about soup items as well. So define when you're going to do these things. You can do this at the start, you can do this at the end. When are you going to control your soup items? If it's happening during your sprint, then how are you controlling those items? Locking them out of your sprint and keeping them in your sprint and using Scrum. The other thing about documentation as well is that most people forget that stories and acceptance criteria in Agile sense is documentation. A lot of people forget that. As long as you can prove what those stories were and what those acceptance criteria were and how you keep them, if you're just writing them down, that's really not good enough. What you need to also do is document how you define them, or how you define the definition of done, and how you agree to that, and the objective of the definition of done, and with your evidence. That's really, really important. My other bit of advice as well, this isn't standard, but apply it to your documentation as well. So make sure that your documentation, that your process you're going to create is done, it's defined. I can give this to an auditor and he will be happy. No, I'm not running around trying to generate this stuff. It is apparently a true story that if the FDA turn up at your door, they will ask for this stuff in 15 minutes. And if you don't get it, then you might be in a whole heap of trouble. So you need to be able to do it very quickly. It's not going to need Havas. It's a true story. So the other thing as well is this sign-off really important as well. Really, really important. It's a really important part of the definition. But make sure you're signing off. Who's signing off? How's that working? Is your business owner sign off on requirements? Have your engineer software signed off on requirements? Have your engineer signed off on what's being delivered? You need that traceability. You need to say who did what and how they verified it. Managing risk is also really important as well. So you need to make sure that, again, it's part of your definition. When you do risk control, at what point you do risk control? If you do it during your iteration, during your sprint, how are you controlling those things? And do it with every conclusion as well. So you can do it at every story level. When a story comes in and you've got your story definition, your acceptance criteria, do a risk analysis on it. Say, okay, what does this mean? How risky is this? When you finish an increment, so if you finish a sprint or an iteration, risk assess again. So, okay, if we introduce any further risk, and right at the end, before you even do the release, but do it at the release point, just cover off all your risks. Have we been through every risk? Are we introducing further risks? Does everything check the boxes? The other thing in Agile TR45 does talk around this pair programming. So pair programming is a really useful tool. It can be a very useful verification tool, so you can verify changes somebody's made. It can be verified by another person at the time a review is being done. A lot of the standards, 6.3.4, and even TR45 talks around the independence of reviews, qualification of reviews as well. These things are quite important. If someone's doing a review, how qualified are they to do that review? It's no good saying a junior engineer has reviewed a senior engineer. What's their qualifications? It works in reverse, but you need to show that. But you also need to show the independence as well. And if you've got two guys working together on a bit of code and they've been coding away for a couple of weeks, and then you may then say, okay, so how are you verifying the independence of those people? You can't really. So you might have to switch the pairs when you do a review, or you may have to change it up slightly. If you can't do those things, then you might do the formal code review, but you need to show the independence in order to go look for it. The other thing as well is the parent sessions, you need to record it as well. So you obviously can have code, that's a given, but you need also to measure your outcomes as well and your actions, kind of if a reviewer, if someone working in pairs has made some changes, why did they make those changes? Very often you'll find these things in your source control, in your source control system, whatever you may use. But when the guys are checking code in, then very often you can use that to do it. The other thing as well, really important, something called stop the line, TR45 talks about it. Stop the line basically means process monitoring. You're willing to stop, willing to say, whatever process we've got, it has to stop. We can't just keep going and going and going and going and going because there's problems. And it's how you verify those problems as well. So it could be in an agile sense that you're doing. It's really around visualizing it and fixing it. The 3045 actually talks about something called kappas, which stands for corrective and relevant actions. Kappas are a part of your quality management system. And because all these things fit inside of the quality management system, then if there's something gone wrong, you can raise a kappa to show, okay, something's gone wrong here, I'm raising a kappa, and I can show these things. Because what may happen is that somebody may say, okay, so you had all these problems, and some of these problems came out of your process. How did you address those problems? You may say, well, I did this, I did this, I did this. And they may say, well, there was impact on quality, so why are your kappas? Why are you not raising the kappas for these things? And you may In doing so, you may then cause your own, may cause a problem with your policy management system level, so it'll be audited. So that's quite important. The other thing as well is about architecture. So in Agile, it's usually the architecture is emergent. But as long as you document your architecture before you do a release, fine. And you can really generate a lot of this documentation as well. And you can do it really, as long as you specify where you're going to do it. So you may do it at the start, some of it. You may do it at the end, and you may do it during storage. As long as you document how you're going to do it and where you're going to do it, everything will be fine. If really your tools support your process, then all this is very easy. If you're trying to retrofit an architecture or way you're doing your architecture to your process, you're going to have a lot of problems. Looking about verification as well, so some of these other things, TR talks about some of these things. These are the other parts of the verification steps. So you may have continuous integration, we've talked around some of these things, automated testing, regression testing. Also your QA output as well. You test plans, test output, but you need these steps. Most of the time, your software engineering process will have these things. It will be there, it will exist. It's just what you need to say is that what will be the outputs of these things and how.